and welcome to the class of business studies. Today we will start with chapter 7, that is sources of business finance, and these are the contents, that is meaning of business finance, nature and significance, and owner's fund. Here borrowed funds were also there, the part of this particular chapter. Since board has eliminated or deleted that portion this year, so we are not going to study that. Now starting with meaning, that is concept of finance. Business finance refers to capital structure or capital funds and credit funds which is invested in the business. So what is the significance of this business finance? Why each and every business firm requires finance? Finance we called as a lifeblood of the business. So business is concerned with the production and distribution of goods and services for the satisfaction or needs of the society. So for carrying out various activities related to business, they requires funds or money, that is business finance. Now finance therefore is called as the lifeblood of any business. The requirement of funds by business to carry out various kind of activities related to production, distribution and so on. A business cannot function unless adequate, that means any business firm, small or large, cannot function if sufficient or adequate funds are available to them. So initial capital contributed, that means initially from first hand when they are contributing capital by the entrepreneur, it is not always sufficient, that is not a one time investment to take care of all, that means they need to take care of all kinds of financial requirement of the business. A business person therefore has to look for different sources, that means any owner of the firms, they need to take care of various sources from where they can arrange the funds, from where the need for funds can be met. So the need for funds arises from the stage when an entrepreneur makes a decision to start a business, that means the first investment. Some funds are needed immediately, that means for day to day working, that is in terms of working capital requirement, they require day to day, that means daily basis they require some money or funds for the purchase of plant and machinery, furniture, other fixed assets or current assets. Similarly, some funds are required for day to day operation in terms of current assets, that is purchase of raw material, paying salary to their employees, etc. So also when the business expands, it needs funds. Now the sources of this finance or sources of funds available on the basis of ownership are in two ways, that is owner's fund and borrowed funds. Starting with owner's fund, since I said borrowed funds is eliminated from the your course. So owner's fund, on the basis of this, the sources can be classified into two, that is sources of owner funds means funds that are provided by the owner of an enterprises, which may be a sole trader, that means this owner can be a engage in sole proprietorship business, that is he may be sole trader, or partnership business, or shareholders of company. Apart from capital, it also includes profits which is reinvested in the business in the form of retained earning. Sources of this permanent capital, that means this kind of owner funds are the source as a permanent capital remains invested in the business for a longer period of time or longer duration and is not required to be refunded during the life period of the business till the business winds up. Such capital forms the basis on which owners acquire their right of control, that means each and every owner is having a right of control over this kind of owner funds which they have. And issue of equity shares and retained earnings are the two major important sources from where owners funds can be obtained. Provision of risk capital, the return of this particular capital, that is owner's capital, depends upon the rate of earning of the company, that is what is the cash flow position of the company. In case company is incurring heavy losses, then it is not compulsory to pay any return on owner's fund. Now there are some sources of raising this owner's funds, as I said it is two. The first we have is retained earning, which is also a part of owner's fund. A company generally does not distribute all its profit or earnings amongst the shareholders as dividend, but company is keeping aside some amount of profit which can be used for the future prospect. A portion of the net earnings may be retained in the business or kept in the business for use in the future endeavors. This is known as retained earnings. So it is a source of internal financing or self-financing or plowing back of profits, that is keeping some part of money or saving some amount of money from the profit after providing dividend to the shareholders. The profit available for plowing back in an organization depends on many factors like net profit, dividend policy and age of the organization. Features are retained earning, which is a permanent source of funds. As I said, it is a part of owner's fund. So, it is a permanent source of funds for any organization. It does not involve any explicit cost in the form of giving interest, dividend or flotation cost. As the funds are generated internally, that means these funds are generated within the organization, there is a greater degree of operational freedom and flexibility available with this kind of funds. It enhances the capacity of the business, it increases the capacity of the business to invest the funds, to absorb unexpected losses also, that is risk. It may lead to increase in the market price of the equity shares of a company, that is on the basis of retained earning, it is increasing the market rate of the equity shares. Issue of shares. Now, when we talk about shares, there are two kinds of shares, that is equity and preference shares. Issue of shares is again a part of owner's fund only. The capital obtained by issue of shares is known as a share capital, and the capital of a company is divided into small units called shares, and each share has its nominal value, and as such there are two types of shares normally used or normally issued by a company. These are equity and preference shares. The money raised by issue of equity shares is called equity share capital, and the money used by raising by issue of preference shares is called as preference share capital. First, talking about equity shares and its features. Equity shares are the most important source of raising long-term capital by a company. Actually, these equity shareholders are just equivalent to owners of the company. These represents the ownership of company, and thus the capital raised by issue of equity shares or such shares is known as ownership capital or owners funds. Equity share capital is a prerequisite to the creation of a company, that means it has greater hands in the creation of the company. Equity shareholders do not get a fixed dividend, that means they are getting their part of dividend at the time, maybe at the time of winding up, so they are not getting the dividend in comparison to preference shareholder regularly, but are paid on the basis of earnings by the company. They are referred to as residual owners since they receive what is left after all other claims on the company's income and assets have been settled. They enjoy the reward as well as bear the risk of ownership. Their liability, however, is limited to the extent of capital which is contributed by them in the organization. Further, through their right to vote, these shareholders have a right to participate in the affairs of the management. They are actually they can give suggestions, they can make decisions in the company. Equity shareholders are suitable for the investors who are willing to assume a risk for higher returns. That means for adventurous shareholders, equity shareholder is the best one. Payment of dividend to the equity shareholder is not very compulsory. Therefore, there is no burden on the company regarding this respect. Equity capital provides credit worthiness to the company. That means because of equity shareholder, their rate of interest, it provides the credit worthiness to the company, goodwill, confidence to the prospective loan providers. Democratic control over management of the company is assured due to voting rights of the equity shareholder. Second is preference shares and features. The capital raised by issue of preference share is called as preference share capital. Preference shareholders enjoy a preferential position over equity shareholders in two ways. That is, they receive a fixed rate of dividend regularly out of the net profits of the company before any dividend is declared to equity shareholders. That is, before receiving the dividend by equity shareholders, the first priority is with the preference shareholders of the company. Receiving their capital after the claims of the company's creditor have been settled at the time of liquidation. In other words, as compared to equity shareholders, the preference shareholders have a preferential right and claim over the dividend and repayment of the capital. Preference shares resemble debentures as they bear fixed rate of return. That means their rate of return is pre-decided, fixed by the management. They will get that much only. Preference shareholders generally do not enjoy any voting rights. They are not allowed to participate in the affairs of the management. Preference shares provide reasonably steady income. That means their income, whatever they are receiving, it is steady. Why? Because their rate of interest is fixed in the form of fixed rate of return and safety of the investment. Preference shares are useful for those investors who want fixed rate of return regularly with comparatively low risk. Preference shareholders have a preferential right of repayment over equity shareholders in the event of liquidation of the company. Now next is global depository receipt, that is GDRs. The local currency shares of a company are delivered to the depository banks. The depository bank issues depository receipts against these kind of shareholders or against these shares. Such depository receipts denominated in US dollars are known as global depository receipts. This GDR is a negotiable instrument and can be traded freely like any other security in the market. In the Indian context, if we see, a GDR is an instrument issued abroad by an Indian company to raise funds in some foreign currency and is listed and traded on a foreign stock exchange. A holder of this GDR can at any time convert it into the number of shares it represents. Why? Because as we say that these kind of shares are having negotiable, is a negotiable instrument, and so he can do so at any time and convert it into the number of shares it represents. The holder of GDRs do not carry any voting rights, but only dividends and capital appreciation he will receive. Many Indian companies such as Infosys, Reliance, Wipro, ICICI have raised money through issue of GDRs. Fifth is American Depository Receipt, that is ADR. This kind of depository receipt issued by a company in the USA are known as American Depository Receipt, as the name suggests. ADRs are bought and sold in American markets like regular stocks. It is similar to GDR except that it can be issued only to American citizens and can be listed and traded on stock exchange of USA only. Sixth and last is Indian Depository Receipt. IDRs are like GDR or ADR except that the issue is in a foreign company raising funds from Indian market, and these IDRs are rupee denominated, that is it is done in our own currency. They can be listed on any Indian stock exchange. Features of this IDRs are, the IDRs can be listed on any Indian stock exchange market. A single IDR can represent more than one share. So the holder of this have no right to vote in the company. It provides an additional investment instead, and that is an opportunity to Indian investors for overseas investment. It satisfies the capital need of foreign companies. It provides listing facility to foreign companies to list in the Indian equity market and reduces the risk of our Indian investor. That means if somebody is having this IDR, that is a depositor, it reduces the risk of Indian investors who want to take their money abroad. So thank you dear students, this much only. We will meet again in the next video. Till then, goodbye.